This was such a weird chapter. It was somber. Hello, my wonderful viewers, and welcome to another episode of Betty Adams Overanalyzes. Today we will be taking a spoiler-free look at Kaiju number 8, chapter 119. If for some reason you're not into that, you can check out the links below the video to get yourself a copy of one of my books. The most recently published is Hidden Fires, Dragons, Aliens, and Things That Go Boop in the Night, a book where I investigate generational trauma and the importance of community through a science fantasy perspective. This spoiler-free review is a little bit difficult to do because I'm going to be talking about themes that could maybe be considered light spoilers, but probably not. One of the things that I've noticed about Matsumoto's work is that Matsumoto made some very interesting comments, had the hero characters make disparaging comments about what would now be considered kamikaze tactics, and scientific experimentation on members of your own species being cruel and inhumane and terrible, kaiju-like attributes. And when you read these in the context of the story, you can't help but wonder if this was Matsumoto's way of working through the kind of suppressed generational trauma left by the events of the 20th century in Japan. Not necessarily what was done to Japan, but some of the things that the Japanese military-industrial complex did during their ascension to power. Another thing Matsumoto does is really emphasize the importance of community connections. All great manga address the issues of their day, and Matsumoto created a really on-the-nose addressing of the isolation and loneliness epidemic that the modern young person, as they switch into middle age, feels, because those community structures, both in Japan and the United States and Britain, pretty much anywhere in the world where you see a first world developed nation, you have this issue. The internet has connected us so much, but it's also deprived us of many of the community infrastructures, the clubs, the associations that supported the industrial people as they shifted away from their more agrarian roots. And this has led to many people of our generation and the next feeling lonely and isolated. And it has become necessary as human beings to proactively reach out and find those communities, be it churches, be it clubs, be it fandoms, be it work life. There are still these communities out there, but they're no longer set up for us to just step into without thought. Back in the day, you went to the church, you went to the temple, you participated in these traditions that were surrounding you, protecting you, uplifting you spiritually and emotionally for generations. But as technology and civilization has changed, we oftentimes don't have that anymore. So the individual has to be more proactive in reaching out. And we see that not just in Kafka's arc, but in the arcs of other people, in Reno and Mina. They have fallen into this kind of despairing aspect because those community infrastructures have really failed them in this modern day Tokyo, which is probably a good representation of any modern day city in this aspect. And part of the adventure that they've been going on is reaching out and reconnecting with their communities. In Kikoru's case, this is shown as her reconnecting with her father and mother. And in Jin Narumi's case, he has lost his family, but he found that in Director General Iso, and then in taking care of Director General Iso's daughter, even if he doesn't claim to need it as much as, say, Kafka or Kikoru are willing to admit that they do. Now, if you've ever studied literature or psychology, you find this described as going down to hell to rescue your father. Dr. Peterson of internet fame talks about this a lot, how this is a motif that shows up in so many stories, from African stories to Greek stories to Jewish stories. Pretty much anywhere where you find a long story tradition, you'll find the story of the hero who has to travel down into hell to retrieve their loved one, usually a father. And this represents how each new generation, in this case I've been blaming the technology, but this really does happen with each generation. Each generation is somewhat cut off from the social fabric of the generation before them. And in order to find themselves mature, healthy human beings, they have to go back down, find where the previous generation let those social connections die, and rescue the traditions of their fathers from that place where they've been allowed to languish. And in story arc after story arc, we've seen Matsumoto playing a variation on this riff. It's like that really, really famous classical song that starts out bum 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 bum, and the entire first part of this classical music, which is known as the most recognizable piece of Western music ever, is just 4 notes played over and over again in different ways. And even I, who am not a trained musician, can recognize that song even if I've forgotten its name. In the same way, Matsumoto plays this story over and over again, but it never feels repetitive because each time it's slightly different. You have Kokoru trying to rescue her father. You have Vice Captain Hoshina going back down and finding why he was fighting in the first place, his love of the actual combat. Again, I know it seems like I'm wandering, but what I'm saying is that in this chapter, Matsumoto has presented us with this, again, minor spoilers, Matsumoto has presented us with what appears to be just an action chapter. Every single character is taking action, doing something vital to the fight that's going on. It happens in a few seconds. But instead of feeling the hype, the excitement, the adrenaline rush I generally get with the Kaiju number 8 action chapter, I came away feeling very somber, very thoughtful, because this was a chapter about suffering and about shame and about grief and about generational trauma. Even though that wasn't the main focus, Matsumoto wasn't dragging us through these repetitive, nasty emotions, but he was looking at them and looking at what you need to do as a human to overcome the burden of existence that was placed on you by the society that you were born into. And the answer is, as it's been throughout the series, finding your community, connecting with your friends, going back, finding those roots deep in your family that tell you who you are, and using that to move forward. I guess in a way it really is a Shonen Jump friendship was the real treasure all along type of story arc, but done in such a mature way. But yeah, this chapter really left me feeling somber and thoughtful, but encouraged and uplifted. I am really going to have to put some thought into the full spoiler version because it's going to be deep. But what do you think, my wonderful viewers? Did you see this as just an action chapter? Did it leave you with an action high, or were you left feeling somber and thoughtful as you considered prices paid long ago by people who were dead before we were born? Tell me what you think in the comments below. Hit that like and subscribe button, and peace out, my wonderful viewers. Step into a world of science and of story, of laughter and of tears. Betty Adams has crafted entire worlds of science fiction and science fantasy adventure in her Humans Are Weird series and in her Dying Embers series. Be prepared to laugh, cry, and become absorbed. Check out her books at the links below the video.